Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Deborah Levine, Executive Director of Love Heals, the Allison Gertz Foundation for AIDS Education, and the host of the series Health Watch. Founded in 1992, Love Heals' mission is to eliminate new infections through education in communities vulnerable to HIV infection. Our organization's goal is to empower youth, their parents, and their allies to fight HIV through HIV prevention and leadership development training. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing 4 dynamic women who are among the driving forces behind the important work of the New York City Council's Young Women's Initiative, formally launched on October 8, 2015. The initiative's goal is to address gender, race inequality in policies and resources that affect the delivery of vital services of young women, especially young women of color, in the areas of health, economic development, education, self-sufficiency and mobility, and criminal justice. A similar initiative for young men was launched by Mayor Michael Bloomberg in 2011. Here to discuss the goals and objectives of the Young Women's Initiative are co-chairs Dr. Danielle Moss-Lee, thank you for joining us, along with Joanne Smith, and Amanda Matos, co-chair of the Young Women's Advisory Council, and Octavia Lewis, our co-chair of the Young Women's Initiative Health Work Group. Dr. Danielle Moss-Lee is the president and CEO of the YWCA of New York City. Joanne Smith is the founder and executive director for Girls for Gender Equity, an organization committed to the physical, psychological, social and economic development of young girls and women. Amanda Matos is the head of the Womanhood Project, an organization she founded to promote the social and political activism of high school girls in the Bronx. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us and being our guests today.
Thanks for having us. This is exciting.
Dr. Matos-Lee and Ms. Smith, tell our viewers about the Young Women's Initiative and why it was created, and it came into being, its goals and its objectives.
So Joanne, why don't you kick us off, since you were really the catalyst for this momentous opportunity?
Well, there were so many catalysts for this opportunity. So the Young Women's Initiative actually is spearheaded by the speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito of the City Council. And with the Young Women's Initiative, it is an initiative that came at a moment, especially right now, where we're at a movement moment, right? And understanding that racial justice within the context of the United States historically has not included girls and women, and the centering of girls and women and the needs that they have. And we understand that within this movement moment, for it to be a movement, we need to also center young women and girls and the needs they have. Understanding that young women and girls are affected by sexual assault, are affected by high rates of violence and state violence, are affected by foster care, have health needs, and have a number of disparities and gaps in services that we need to support right along with our brothers. And so last year, a number of national activists from Girls for Gender Equity, from the African American Policy Forum, scholars, Christy Dodson, Brittany Cooper, philanthropic partners, community members, youth, came together and really challenged the national initiative, My Brother's Keeper, to be gender inclusive, to be inclusive of cis, trans, and gender nonconforming youth, to be inclusive of everyone in the community that we're saying as a racial justice initiative from the White House, we need to address community-wise. And so as part of that challenge, we've recognized that the Young Men's Initiative was launched here, and My Brother's Keeper was modeled after that initiative. And so we had a call for action from our local politicians, and we had a town hall hearing where Octavia Lewis stole the show, and really generously, along with many other youth, shared and were the catalyst for changing the hearts and minds of so many people. There were 400 in the audience, but so many who have been able to watch and be a part of hearing and holding community and what it looks like to support girls and women of color. And so they shared their stories, they shared tragedies, and they also shared advocacy strategies. And it was really a moment that let New York City know that we are really ready and prime and ready. We have everything we need. There are enough resources to really move this movement and to really center the needs of all of our young people within New York City.
Thank you.
So so it has been such an honor and privilege for me to work with Joanne and our other co-chair, Ana Oliveira, at the New York Women's Foundation, under the leadership and guidance of our speaker, to really broaden the circle of folks who have been doing this work in very siloed ways, and finally bring the tribe together all in one place. That's been especially incredible, but also understanding that this is not a conversation about the individual behavior of girls of color in this city. This is really about looking at the ways systems do our young people a disservice on a daily basis. Bringing together folks from the social sector, from government, from the philanthropic community to say, what are we doing institutionally that's getting in the way of allowing our girls to blossom in the way that they should and deserve?
So this really sounds like an initiative that there is place for everyone at the table to come and sort of share best practices, what works, what hasn't, figure out where the gaps are and what some of the next steps will be.
Absolutely.
So why? Why is this important?
I think, for me, pick an issue, right? If you look at public health, if you look at education, the intersections of race, gender, and poverty mean that women of color are automatically guaranteed to be on the bottom of every kind of data set that we're taking a look at. And so that's not about the individual behavior of women and girls of color. That's really about our institutions and systems really reflecting a historical racial bent towards anti-blackness, right? On the scale of understanding that there are other folks of color who fall within that range, but that, from a foundational perspective, right, this whole country, our whole economic and political structure is based on slavery, right? That's how the United States got to be where it is now as an economic powerhouse. So, but that means also like on the backs of mostly women and people of color. So how do we need to restructure our organizations, our government, our agencies to make
Our
sure
policies,
and
right.
policies and really to hold folks accountable,
That's right.
hold ourselves accountable and our organizations accountable for the outcomes that affect these young people's lives.
And absolutely, and just to piggyback off what you said, it made me think of a quote in which my mentor gave me to live by, is that people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you ask the question of why now, why not now, should be the rebuttal. As we have seen historically that young women have turned into the caretakers. If you look at, even if you are down in Central Park, you look at the young women, or you look at the women that are now taking care of the children of some of the people that run this city, and they are what? Women of color. If you look at who takes care of the families when our brothers are incarcerated in the penal system, it is whom? It is our young women. So that is why it is important now, because often, too often, their narratives have gone in the shadows, and yet they have been the breadwinners, they have been the backbone, they have been the structure that has held this country together. And yet, it is sad that it has taken this long, 2015, in order for us to kick that initiative off. But I am proud to sit at this table with this distinguished group of women that are able to address those issues, because it is long overdue.
Well, it is truly a pleasure and an honor. So, Ms. Matos, what is the role of the Young Women's Council in relationship to furthering the initiative's work and sort of helping to meet its goals?
Yes. So all too often, not only are women of color left out of mainstream conversations, young women of color are definitely an afterthought. So the fact that young women of color are not taught necessarily critical analysis or to challenge systems or to advocate for themselves is not okay. The Young Women's Advisory Council is seeking to change that. So actually including young women of color who are experts, not just experts of their lived experience, but experts in the different issue areas that we're working on to be included in the process, but not just being included, being decision makers. So the role of the Young Women's Advisory Council is for the young women who are participating on the council, and these young women range from the ages of 14 to 25, include women of color, cisgender, transgender women, gender nonconforming folks. And the role of these people are to really be at the table with the adults, being there with the policymakers, with the council members, saying, I'm an expert and I disagree with you, or I'm an expert and this was my lived experience. And so this hasn't been done before. Young people are rarely included in policy or decisions like this, not let alone in city council. So the role is transformative, and we're meeting our goals again by recentering, not just including young women, but recentering everything we do on their lived experience.
So I just heard you mention two particular titles or labels, one being transgender and the other being cisgender. Would the panel here mind describing for our audience exactly what does that mean so that people can be politically correct, understand the terminology that we're using?
Sure. Cisgender, cis in the Latin terms mean one and the same. So a cisgender person is someone who identifies with the sex in which they were assigned at birth. A transgender person would be someone like myself who does not identify with the gender in which I was assigned at birth.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We want to make sure that we're giving people not only the knowledge about what the initiative is, but we also want to give people the language.
Yeah.
So that they can begin to become even more culturally competent as we're moving forward in this work. So I heard you, Dr. Mosley, mention earlier that young women of color tend to be at the bottom of most of our scales. Can you give us a little more detail? What does that really mean? Are we talking about grade levels? Are we talking about access to care? Are we talking about rates of new HIV infection? Is it about
Everything.
Right.
Yes.
You're making the
All
list.
of the above.
All of the above.
Okay.
Whether it's access to college completion, whether it's high blood pressure or breast cancer, whether it's earned income for the same jobs that men are earning more for. I've had to say in my organization, when we hold up the statistic of 77 cents on the dollar, hello, that does not include Black and Latino women, right, who are making 64 and 56 cents on the dollar.
Okay.
And so really kind of inserting ourselves in a way that is, to me, really liberating, right, to finally feel like I'm not betraying anything for coming into my space and coming into spaces kind of representing my gendered living experience, right? Because we are making decisions based on this identity every day. It defines, should I take this train or that train at this time of day? Should I cross the street? Should I go into this store? So much about who we are as women defines our experience. And so as a woman of color, to kind of have that suppressed and to watch my own teenage daughter, struggle to have a voice and to name things in a way that is empowering has been an additional kind of motivator for me, right? So we're kind of coming out of the shadows in a way. When I was coming up, I will say I'm probably the oldest person at the table, right? We didn't own...
I don't know about that, but okay, we'll go with that one.
We didn't own that term feminism, right? And I can remember being a student activist on my college campus and feeling like, oh, well, I don't want to kind of betray the brothers of color by kind of getting into the whole women versus men conversation, right? But we saw things happening and the ways in which people were relating to each other, taking advantage of each other, that we kind of let a lot of stuff slide, right? And so what is so exciting to me about the young women, particularly in this instance and also a lot of the young women that I've worked with in my own career, is that they are not going to be silenced at all, right? They're just not going out like that. And I just find it so liberating and empowering. And I think this is an incredible moment for New York City. But as Joanne has pointed out, we really have the opportunity to set a national conversation and agenda around how folks talk about girls and young women of color.
I think there's so much to say about that. When you look at the expulsion rates of girls of color in school, especially in New York City, 53 black girls were expelled in 2012 compared to 1 white girl. And the African American Policy Forum had to find actually 1 and couldn't, so used 1 as an indicator just as a comparison. So 53 girls that were expelled total were black girls in school. 1 in 6 are suspended. And suspended at 6 times the rate of their counterpart, rather. And so when we look at the numbers and you compare that to then how many white boys are suspended or expelled, who's leading in that crisis of expulsion and suspension? Black boys and black girls. So why not, right, as Octavia said, address this issue now, especially when we can identify as a nation that we need to address it for our boys. Right? We're all growing up in the same households. We're all growing up in the same communities. When you're addressing poverty for boys, when you're addressing institutional and structural racism, you must address that for everyone who's then within that structure and institution. And so when you look at also for girls at this moment right now, they have the capacity in a way where, I mean, I wish at 15 years old I was at the table with the speaker and being in a community where I know at 15 I'm going to continue doing this work. I grew up in New York. I mean, you talk about Amanda, I'll let her speak for herself, but doing this work and growing up doing this work, an investment in the community, investment in yourself. I mean, what else would you want to come from girls than that? And these are young people who are going to stay in their community and 15 years from now continue working with us. I mean, because we understand that while this is an amazing opportunity and initiative and moment, I mean, for many of us, this is our lives we are talking about, right? This is living, this is our income, this is us being able to survive, us being able to decide whether or not we can even own property. I mean, so many of our young people have said, I have never even imagined owning a house. So this, you know, dream of white picket fence, and that was never my dream. Actually, can I dream? Can I have my own dreams? And can I do it my way? And so really right now, I mean, it's just such a right moment for these young people to really lead the way and to do it with us, to do it next to us, and for us to make that room for that to happen within this moment.
So to me, it really sounds like we're talking about, and I know Joanne's a social worker by trade like myself, so we always go to that, get to meet the person where they're at and sort of help them along in this process. But this really reminds me of a model, the sort of continuum of community care. It's like putting the young person in the middle and figuring out all the different aspects that they need, whether it's access to health care and housing and job training programs and workforce development and learning finances and how to budget. It's all of those pieces. Sounds like the mix.
I think it's all of those pieces. I'm not a social worker. I'm a former middle school teacher.
And that's even better.
Thing, right? Bronx and Brooklyn. But I think this is also an opportunity for us to use a race-conscious lens to look at our own stuff. So let's say we have this young person at the center of care, right? Why am I more likely to refer that black girl for suspension or expulsion than someone else in my school, right? So we're not just saying, let's look at programs and things that hold up young people, but what is it within ourselves, within our organizations, within our beliefs that shapes the experiences of other people in a way that perpetuates injustice? And I think the fact that we have unapologetically kind of put this idea of race as a man-made social construct, that means that we can do something differently, right? We weren't brought into this world to be divided in this way, and so we can be making a different choice. And how do we as organizations, as policymakers, as government officials who say we want to reflect the face of New York City in a powerful way, hold ourselves accountable to say, wait a minute, if Black women and Latino women are not getting the kind of right diagnosis around certain health disparities, that's about the quality of care. That's not about, you know, who didn't come through the door, but the folks who came through the door, you know, didn't get the diagnosis or the treatment that they deserved. And what is it about how we operate that allows that to continue to happen?
And to build off of this, what's I think unique about the Young Women's Initiative is that we're not just creating systemic change, we're figuring out how to do this culture shift. So the fact that instead of just only making policy recommendations to City Council, we're also assessing what's already working in New York City. So who are the advocates, the community leaders, the organizations that are already doing this, that are addressing that culture shift of whether it's implicit bias or practices, or mentoring young girls of color to be in leadership positions or to build support in their own communities. So I think that's incredible that, again, we're not only thinking about systemic change, we're thinking about what's already working and how do we uplift the folks that are already doing this daily.
Absolutely. And speaking on the health component, we also have to look at how our young women are addressed when they go to these healthcare facilities. For instance, if you are someone, again, the system was not implemented, or created, implemented, or designed with none of our young women in mind. So to look at the fact that our young women are being expelled at excessive rates, of course she's not going to know what the term of diabetes is when someone say, oh, well, you're at high risk of diabetes, or oh, you're at high risk of hypoglycemia, which is high cholesterol. They're not going to know that if they're spending more time being suspended versus being in school with their counterparts, getting the quality education in which they deserve. So again, it starts with the system as a whole that is broken. Like Dr. Mosley said, it is not the individual, but it is the system as a whole that has allowed our young women to fall between the cracks. And even with this initiative, yes, it is easy for people to come with best intentions, but also it is easy for those people to pick up the oppressive measures of those that we are trying to change. And what I mean by that is, it is easy for someone, as you use the term feminist, to be misogynistic. And that is something in which I can honestly say I have not encountered with this initiative since its beginning. It is something in which I can honestly say it was intentional when it carved out space for people of trans and gender nonconforming experience. So for me, it made me feel like the work in which we are doing here, it is meaningful, and that it does have substance because, again, everything was thought about ahead of time. And especially knowing these issues and, you know, the prevalence of our young women, let's talk about our young women of trans experience and when they go to access health care. Think about a 16-year-old individual that is trans, that is about to go through puberty. They can receive puberty blockers, but since there are policies in place where you have to have parental consent, that blocks and hinders a lot of young trans women from receiving the quality and access of care that they deserve. And with that simple measure of just giving someone a hormone delaying agent, it's not changing anything. It is just delaying the onset of puberty until they reach the age of majority where they can give their own consent. Things that are simple like that are things in which have not been discussed. And those are some of the things in which I'm glad to be a part of, especially the health component, where we can address those issues for young trans women.
And I just want to compliment Joanne because she really has, in a very fearless and intentional way made sure that there is space for everyone at this
Indeed.
table. And I will
Indeed.
say, as a co-chair, she is constantly holding us accountable to make sure that, yes, the young people are in the room. Do they have voice? Are they being heard? Are we reflecting back on what they're bringing to the table? Which pockets of young people have been left out of this conversation? You know, going back to do a second round. Yes, we've started the work of the working groups, but if we don't have cross-cultural, cis and trans, LGBT representation, then we're not done with the work. And so I thank you for that. For, you know, basically she is that bridge. She's her back is the bridge.
Listen,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I just know that 21 trans women have been killed this year, 21 trans women of color thus far. I don't know by the time this taping is done, will we have another death. I know 6 black women in the month of July were killed by police violence. And I know that, you know, this really is an initiative that won't be everything for everyone, but it's an opportunity really to catalyze the momentum we have, the need, I mean, to save lives and to address the issues that we're here talking about. I mean, at this point, I mean, it literally is about losing our chains. It literally is about saying, my life matters. I'm going to take up this space standing up. I'm going to speak for myself, right? Because what is the alternative to that? For many of us, there's no alternative to that.
Right.
The alternative to that is continue to be oppressed, continue to struggle, barely survive, or die. I mean, and that's real for many people. And that's why with the leadership of this initiative, I mean, it was really amazing that the speaker said yes to this. When we had that call to action, Octavia, that it wasn't even the speaker we had in mind, right? But she saw it and could see herself in it and said, I can do this, and said yes, right? And that's all it took was one yes. But then now, women, I was in a meeting yesterday where it was a woman in her late 40s, possibly early 50s, who said for the first time she saw herself, she's an Asian woman, in the room. She saw herself at the table and was moved the room to tears because it was finally a mirror and a validation of who she is as a person and her experiences. And that is in a space that has resources. That was in a philanthropic space. That matters.
Yeah,
I mean,
it does.
that matters so much. So the leadership and the co-chair leadership, the group leadership, I mean, we got to hear it later on, but we demanded that it be the people who are doing the work, right? It doesn't mean you come there because of your title. Even looking for organizations of color who were led by black women was scarce, right?
Far
And when I
and
say
few
led by
between.
black women, I mean led on the books by black women, the highest salary, right? We know they're led by black, or women of color, but led, in an executive level, highest salary, highest, decision-making power, and that was. Send me that list. Send us that list if you have that list, because it was scarce. I could count on my two hands the organizations that came up. And so this is necessary so that these young people, especially the ones who are 24 and under, as they do grow up, they're growing up in that space where they are rubbing elbows with a Deborah who can then give them direct access to that board meeting, that table, the salaries they deserve, the decision-making power that they deserve. And so I encourage all of them, get to know them, seek the opportunity, ask them to mentor you, at least have lunch with them, get to know them, know that we're not here to campaign and fight, we won that, right? We're here to plan and really assess and get a sense of what is possible as we move forward, because so many of us will continue doing this work. And so that's the space you walk into. It's not perfect, a lot of course correction every single day, but the intention and the folks who are at the table are indescribable.
And I would just add too, right, that I think we're at a moment where we can acknowledge that the pain of women of color in particular is an industry, right? If we look at all of the nonprofit organizations in this city, who are we collectively mostly focusing our energy on when we focus on health disparities, when we focus on child care? We are an industry. Our pain has become an industry, and we need to begin to have some accountability around that. When we look at the sector, The fact is that there aren't a lot of black women running nonprofit organizations in this city, and yet we represent who's being served. And guess what else? 80% of that nonprofit workforce, people of color.
That's right.
80% of that 80%, women of color. Why are they poor? We keep them poor, right? We have contracts that won't allow you to pay people a living wage. I have people who've worked on my payroll for 20 years and they still qualify for public assistance. And that was a policy choice that we made as a city to basically create poverty where it didn't have to exist. And we have to begin to have those structural, institutional conversations and say we need to be accountable. You know, for those folks in the philanthropic community who say, you know, we don't do general support. Well, general support is the lifeline of the organizations, right? How can we build systems? How can we be accountable? How can we train our staff? How can we retain talent?
How can we just have
if we
space?
have no
Right.
resources to speak of? But think about all the people who benefit from this system,
Yes.
right? And all the folks who are running multi-million-dollar organizations. You know, I had someone in government say to me, do you realize how few black women are running organizations with a budget of $5 million or more in this city? But look at all the organizations that fit that category that are supposedly serving women of color and don't have us at the table.
Yes.
You know, even for some of the other work that we're doing on capacity building in nonprofits, where we said, you know, we want organizations that are led by folks of color, or have a board majority folks of color. So of course, folks came in and said, oh, but I'm doing great things in the Latina and in the Southeast Asian community. You know, I founded the organization. You know, I don't come from that community. My board doesn't reflect that community.
But we get it.
Why is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Why do you think you have something to offer in that community without giving any kind of respect or holding up the lived experiences of the people in that community? Like, I would not feel empowered to lead an organization that claimed to serve, you know, trans young people and have nobody who's trans on my staff and nobody who's trans on my board. And we
Or
see this
advisory
happen.
council, right?
I don't want, advisory councils don't make financial decisions.
Yes.
You know, they always want to put us in the pocket of programs.
Right.
You know, and I've had funders say, you know, I don't know if folks of color can manage money. You know, that's
Well,
kind of,
that's a long history and definitely
where we
part
are.
of the conversation for sure.
yes, I think this is an incredible opportunity for the community that is the most disproportionately underserviced by this whole industrialized machine of poverty to say it's not working for us.
Yes.
We want something different. We want something new.
That's what bothers me the most when I hear the fact that people of color cannot, especially women of color, cannot manage money. That bothers me because I look at the way the system is designed. If you look at the people that, again, makes the bed at these billion-dollar hotel industries, they are people of color. If you look at the people that prepare the food for these executive people that use this food to nourish their bodies, they're mostly women of color. You say we can't manage money, but yet you will allow us to manage your life. And you say that, again, we can't manage money, but you will allow us to take care of your most valuable assets, which is your children. But yet you say we cannot manage money. I find that to be so hypocritical, that the fact that everything in our society, it is capitalistic. And the way they look at it is, oh, if it's not going to make us any more money, then we don't want to hear about it. But the sad thing about it is, everything in which you care for, we are taking care of it. And yet you don't sit down to digest and think that the most intimate things that are important to you, that should be of most value to you, you entrust with women of color. And that is what is so sad to me. Even when, again, I go back and I look at these nannies and I look at the people that are here doing indentured servants, yes, they are still here. And look at the people that are, cleaning toilets and being laborers. They are women of color. We are here to make sure that when your guests come over, that your house is spotless. We are people to make sure when you come home that there's food on your table. We are there to pick up your children from school. We are there for your children more than we are there for our own children. And yet you place no value in us. That is what bothers me the most.
Well, I couldn't have said that more eloquently.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that and for being bold enough to say what needs to get said. In thinking about all of this, it sounds huge. Sounds huge. But I also know that by taking one bite at a time, we can really begin to make some changes. And so talk to me a little bit about, and I know you guys haven't gotten to a place yet where you have defined the blueprint, figured out all the answers, but talk to me about some of the concrete things that you'd like to see. What are some of the real, besides the goal, what is it that you want to be able to see a year from now? What's on that checklist so that we know that we're heading in the right direction? You know, we've met, we did this fabulous press conference on the steps of City Hall where I saw more women from the New York City Council in one place than I probably have at a city council meeting. And I saw young women, I saw women of a certain age, seasoned women. But what I saw across the board was hope. And so a lot of times when we see these campaigns, everybody gets excited and everybody's motivated. What now? A year from today, how do we begin to check off? Have we succeeded? Where are we in the process?
So what I'm most excited about is, of course, we're going to have policy changes, increased funding, more data and research happening. But what I want to see a year from now is not just us thinking about race and gender and how they intersect, but race, gender, and age. So again, we're talking about the hardships and experiences of women of color, Black women not being included in so much work. But I'm thinking about young girls of color and how ageism is real. And so as we're doing this work and we're uplifting each other and our organizations and our work, I just want to see women on our advisory council and the young women who have yet to be included in this process to be at the table in city council, in these organizations. And so I feel like all the stakeholders we've brought together, it's also an experiment on how we can bring up ageism along with the sexism and racism we're addressing. So a year from now, I want us to meet here again at the table, make a larger table, and maybe just having just the young women and talking about their experiences and for them to be recognized as leaders now, not just tomorrow, but that we're leaders now.
Right. For me, a year from now would be the women that we are addressing, those that are part of the Young Women's Advisory Council, that those young women be employed at these places that have these women that have come to the table. Not only have we made space for them, but we've also offered them an opportunity to have that living wage and not that minimum wage. We have made a way for them that were dependent upon public assistance to be able to be dependent upon themselves. So for me, that is how I would say, you know what, we are heading in the right direction.
A year from now, we will be looking at the election, yes?
Yes.
I want the debate around girls and women of color to be centered within the election. I want that to be same way it's centered. We're working to center Black Lives Matter within Black lives, Black feminine lives, Black trans lives, Black gender non-conforming lives. What does that conversation look like a year from now? How are we measuring and voting in people who are voting us out, essentially, right? I don't want to see some of the electoral still there, the candidates still there, but I vote for you, you vote for me, right? And so that's what I want to see a year from now. I want to see in New York City, I mean, we're going to all continue doing this work, but a cultural shift in how we're doing this work, right? So when I think of the cultural shift, it's not only within our organizations. I mean, all of our organizations have work to do to level the playing field, but also within philanthropy, a cultural shift, right? Who are you granting dollars to? I always say, if I were a white man leading Girls for Gender Equity, there would be a Girls for Gender Equity in every borough. Right? I would barely need to, lead the work because I would be so resourced because I'm here to save some folks, right? And here, I'm here to do the work of my community because I love my community, but it's taken for granted many times that we're doing that work because we're supposed to do that work, right? And so I'm hoping within philanthropy that shift in dollars and that shift in culture and philosophy around who's deserving, who is valued, who can handle money, right? And that those measures are lifted. Also that accountability around, okay, we do programming in communities of color, right? But how is it that your programming has affected and impacted the lives of the girls within your program, the lives of the young women, the trans young women in the program? How is that being impacted based on what it is that you're giving? More accountability there. And when I say more accountability there, I don't mean more evaluation because I mean, or surveys rather, or longer documentation. I mean real, show me, allow the rubber to hit the road, show me how it is that you are doing that work. You should be able to demonstrate it, especially here in New York City. The last piece of cultural shift is us working together. I mean, before this initiative, I hadn't worked with Dr. Moss. I mean, could you imagine, like, if we never met? Like, my life could be complete. And Amanda, Octavia, I was fortunate enough to meet a lot sooner than this, thank God. But now, like, we're all together doing this work. We're at the table with you. We're here in MNN. I mean, there's a ripple effect. I mean, we know how to make something out of nothing as women of color, as people of color in this world. And so here we have something and some leeway. We're going to definitely maximize it in a year from now. Hopefully feel the impact of that.
So one of my dreams, right, and maybe I'll speak it into existence, is the idea that if you are at ACS or DYCD or DOE and your outcomes around the disproportionalities that we have already kind of stated and demonstrated affect the lives of children of color and girls of color are still the same, that there is a corrective course of action that is built into how you do your business. So that, I'm not saying somebody should get fired, but definitely, if all the social workers in your unit always happen to ... the rest, what's the corrective course of action that happens within your agency to make sure that those outcomes are different? So that we're always bringing the conversation back to the institution and not focusing on the stereotypes and mythology that we have around communities of color and always kind of holding those up. So that's one thing I would love to see. And that also goes for the folks working in the social sector, right? Because one of my jokes that I tell now when I'm invited to talk to different nonprofit organizations, progressive nonprofit organizations, is I am going to talk about race, right? Even if I'm the only person of color in the room, race is always on the menu for me. So if you don't want to hear about it, I'm probably not your keynote speaker. But also kind of reminding people that, put away your cape. I don't need you to have a cape in my community. I need you to check yourself. I need you to check your organization. I need you to think about who you're hiring, who you're promoting. Don't tell me, oh, we have diversity, right? And none of the folks of color make decisions, control budgets, don't have an equal seat of power and authority at the table. So that's one thing that I would like to see. And then, right, at the end of the day, the YWCA is an all-encompassing organization. So I want to use that platform to really have intersectional conversations where young white women and women of color are at the table, right? Because when I see my social media threads, right, that's a big you know, nobody's, you know, intersectional feminism. No one's having this conversation. But really, what I realize is that a lot of young white women don't get the opportunity to even be part of that conversation, right? So before you graduate from wherever you're going to go and come back to my community and tell me what the deal is, I want you to have this opportunity to be re-educated about how women do come together and can come together respectively, respectfully, collectively, holding each other's lived experiences up. Because I don't think that this is a people of color issue. I don't think that it's something we can do in the absence of white allies.
Gotcha. So let me just ask you a closing question, because I know our time is getting close. How will these recommendations be shared with the City Council and with New Yorkers?
There's a process that we go through now where we meet, our 5 working groups meet and meet 6+ times for multiple hours to really hash out, and it's about 30 people within every group, to really hash out what policy issues we're going to land on, what resources allocation are they going to promote and develop. And the co-chairs then take those meeting notes and they send them back to the City Council, and the steering committee, right, takes a look at those notes and meets in between the work group meetings, takes a look at those notes, and really helps to, I guess, filter and go through and make sense of what is needed, what information is needed, what additional meetings are needed, what additional folks need to be at the table. I mean, we're still relatively early in the process, and at the same time, we don't have much time because it's a 6-month planning process that will end in January. So being able to look at that and really assess and help move through what recommendations and policies should then go to the speaker. And so fortunately, the City Council staff is all hands on deck. There are 60 staff members. I've never seen such a thing. I mean, I name it because it's just so important to understand that the catalyst for this, there's so many entities. It requires, cooperation. You can't resist the whole time.
And collaboration.
And collaboration, right? So the
Right.
City Council staff to assign 60 people to work on this shows how serious and invested that they are in this initiative. And so
Gotcha.
we're confident that there will be more policy and recommendations landing than possible.
Okay.
But what that creates is momentum for us to continue going beyond what it is that she ends up championing.
So that brings me to a really critical point. We've heard all of this about the Young Women's Initiative, and so now people are going, how do I get involved? What do I do? How do I do this? I'm an individual, I'm by myself. I don't necessarily belong to a community-based organization. So really, in a snapshot, can you give me some strategies if I'm a single person in my community who feels very strongly about this, or if I belong to an association, the Eastern Stars, whether I'm part of a sorority? What can I do to help move this agenda forward for our young women and girls?
#SheWillBe. So this movement is intergenerational, and so by that it means we're using social media and then we're meeting folks where they're at. We're communicating in a way that's accessible. So with this hashtag, which is also a website, shewillbe.nyc, we're encouraging all folks, right? Really, again, centering it on young girls of color, but all folks who want to engage to use the hashtag and to interact with us. So not only are we using social media as a way that folks can use the hashtag to express what their identity means to them, we're using it as a platform to garner community ideas and support. So twice a month, we actually have Twitter parties where we'll have an hour where folks can ask questions about the campaign, and sometimes the speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito herself, will be answering those questions. And that's an opportunity for young girls of color to share their stories, share their ideas, saying, hey, it would be great if I had this in my school, or this isn't working in my school, what can you do about it? And at the same time, for those community leaders or folks who might not be directly with an organization, they can engage with us through social media to give their policy ideas, to show the needs of where they need support in their community, and to engage with us. And I can honestly say that we respond to every single person that is asking us a question and engaging with us on these platforms.
Well, I can attest to that because I participated last
Okay.
night in the Twitter chat, and I was tweeting. My fingers couldn't move fast enough to keep up, but it really was very exciting to see from across the board, such great ideas, and to really see the community involved. So I really encourage all of our sororities, even our fraternities, because we need allies in this work.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Absolutely.
We can't do this by ourselves. It really is going to take a community that's going to help to lift and launch this.
And I also just wanted to add, we also plan to have community town halls, we plan to have events, we plan to come together and hear, especially thinking about the Young Women's Advisory Council only being able to hold 40 young women, right? Within that space, we still are looking to recruit additional Native American women, Southeast Asian women, Muslim women, and trans women.
Say that right directly to the camera so that you can put that call out.
Sure.
So we want young women to come and participate and be a part of this.
Absolutely. You did that.
Oh, I did.
So if you're 24 and under, and you identify as a woman of color, and you identify as Native American, you identify as trans, you identify as Southeast Asian, we really are looking for you to join. We really have about 8 strong meetings left. We definitely want young women from Staten Island because we want you to get your voice in on what policies need to affect your community and be able to tell City Council that. And so you could actually go to the ggenyc.org website and fill out the link. You could also contact Amanda
Yeah.
through Twitter.
Yeah, through Twitter.
Through Twitter, and she can also send you the link. And so they, as the co-chairs, will go through the screening process so that we have a great mix of diversity within the Young Women's Advisory
Your
Council.
handle?
Oh yeah, my handle is Amanda_R_Matos, which is my name. And also again, just engaging through our website, shewillbe.nyc. All the resources are there as well.
Well, ladies, our time together went by so quickly. And I'd like to really be able to take the last few minutes to really see how we can begin to put that clarion call out and make sure that everyone in the community knows that the Young Women's Initiative is inclusive, it's focused, it has a purpose, it has a mission and a vision, and we will get there together. But collaboration is key to making this happen. So on behalf of Love Heals, the Allison Gertz Foundation, we commit to you that we will hold the first town hall meeting right here and bring an audience in and do a live, whatever we need to do, so that we can really reflect and have the young women sitting here, not only asking the questions, but helping us to gain those answers.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Woo.
Yeah, we need a
Yes.
bigger table.
We're going to need a bigger table, but it's going to be all right. So I'd like to thank my guests, Dr. Danielle Moss-Lee, Joanne Smith, Amanda Matos, and the most lovely of all, Miss Octavia Lewis, for coming and joining me on today's show. We hope that our viewers find today's topic to be informative. And for more information about the Young Women's Initiative, please visit www.shewillbe.nyc, and you'll also find the Young Women's Initiative on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Snapchat, the Vine. If you ain't got it, get it. And for information about the mission and the work of Love Heals, the Allison Gertz Foundation for AIDS Education, please visit our website at www.loveheals.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And on
Snapchat.
behalf, no Snapchat yet. And on behalf of Love Heals, I express my sincere thanks to the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, whose programming enriches all of our lives by presenting us with programs and with information that addresses critical issues that affect us as New Yorkers. We hope that you've enjoyed today's program and you'll tell your family and friends and neighbors about this series. I'm your host, Deborah Levine. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon right here on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ooh.